All right, guys, good morning and happy Friday. Hope it's been a good week for you. Another rainy one today, so fortunately, it looks like we are going to be cooped up indoors again, but makes it for a good day to just sit back, relax, and read. After this video, you're going to submit your journal for the weekend, so don't forget to turn that in. And then after that, you'll take the quiz. I promise it'll be really short. It's honestly probably the easiest quiz I've ever made. So I think if you've been keeping up with the reading, you'll be just fine, I promise. Otherwise, we're going to be on the top of page 29 today, and we'll knock out about 10 pages. This chunk right here is pretty intense, actually, especially towards the end. So I'd say this is kind of where the plot really starts to get moving a little bit here. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. The firehouse. Montag, you shin that pole like a bird up a tree. Third day. Montag, I see you came in the back door this time. The hound bother you? No. Fourth day. Montag, a funny thing. Heard this morning. Fireman in Seattle purposely set a mechanical hound to his own chemical complex and let it loose. What kind of suicide would you call that? 5, 6, 7 days. And then Clarice was gone. He didn't know what there was about the afternoon, but it was not seeing her somewhere in the world. The lawn was empty, the trees empty, the street empty. And while at first he did not even know he missed her or was even looking for her, the fact was that by the time he reached the subway, there were vague stirrings of disease in him. Something was the matter. His routine had been disturbed. A simple routine, true, established in a short few days, and yet he almost turned back to make the walk again, to give her time to appear. He was certain if he tried the same route, everything would work out fine. But it was late, and the arrival of his train put a stop to his plan. Think she's dead? What do you think, Tally? Oh, you want to listen? Oh, wasn't listening, huh? Shame. The flutter of cards, motion of hands, of eyelids, the drone of the time voice in the firehouse ceiling. 1:35, Thursday morning, November 4th. 1:36, 1:37 a.m. The tick of the playing cards on the greasy tabletop. The sounds came to Montag behind his closed eyes, behind the barrier he momentarily erected. He could feel the firehouse full of glitter and shine and silence, of brass colors, the colors of coins, of gold, of silver. The unseen men across the table were sighing on their cards, waiting. 1:45. The voice clock mourned out the cold hour of a cold morning of a still colder year. What's wrong, Montag? Montag opened his eyes. A radio hummed somewhere. War may be declared any hour. This country stands ready to defend its... The firehouse trembled as a great flight of jet planes whistled a single note across the black morning sky. Montag blinked. Beatty was looking at him as if he were a museum statue. At any moment, Beatty might rise and walk about him, touching, exploring his guilt and self-consciousness. Guilt? What guilt was that? Your play, Montag. Montag looked at these men whose faces were sunburnt by 1,000 real and 10,000 imaginary fires, whose work flushed their cheeks and fevered their eyes. These men who looked steadily into their platinum igniter flames as they lit their internal burning black pipes. They and their charcoal hair and soot-colored brows and bluish ash-smeared cheeks, where they had shaven close, but their heritage showed. Montag started up, his mouth opened. Had he ever seen a fireman that didn't have black hair, black brows, a fiery face, and a blue steel-shaved but unshaved look? These men were all mirror images of himself. Were all firemen picked for their looks as well as their productivities? The color of cinders and ash about them, and the continual smell of burning from their pipes. Captain Beatty there, rising in thunderheads of tobacco smoke. Beatty opening a fresh tobacco packet, crumbling the cellophane into a sound of fire. Montag looked at the cards in his own hands. I've been thinking about the fire last week, about the man whose library we fixed. What happened to him? Oh, they took him screaming off to the asylum. He wasn't insane. Beatty arranged his cards quietly. Any man's insane who thinks he can fool the government and us. I tried to imagine, said Montag, just how it would feel. I mean, have firemen burn our houses and our books. We haven't any books. But if we did have some, you got some? Beatty blinked slowly. No. Montag gazed beyond them to the wall with the typed lists of million forbidden books. Their names leapt in fire, burning down the years under the axe, and his hose which sprayed not water but kerosene. No. But in his mind a cool wind started up and blew out the ventilator grill at home, softly chilling his face. And again he saw himself in a green park talking to an old man, a very old man, and the wind from the park was cold too. What do you think he has in his ventilator grill? Oh, we got the cat right here. What's up, Bilbo? Come here, Bilbo. Oh. She just hates being on camera. Look at her. She's miserable. All right, get out of here. Go. Hate you too. Montag hesitated. What? Was it always like this? The firehouse our work? I mean, well, once upon a time. Once upon a time, Beatty said. What kind of talk is that? Fool, thought Montag to himself. He'll give it away. At the last fire, a book of fairy tales, he glanced at a single line. I mean, he said, in the old days, before homes were completely fireproofed. Suddenly it seemed a much younger voice was speaking for him. He opened his mouth, and it was Clarice McKellen speaking. Didn't firemen prevent fires rather than stoke them up and get them going? That's rich, Stoneman and Blackman drew forth their rule books, which also contained brief histories of the firemen of America, and laid them out where Montag, though long familiar with them, might read. Established 1790 to burn English-influenced books in the colonies. The first fireman, Benjamin Franklin. Rule 1. Stop her. Answer the alarm quickly. Rule 2. Start the fire swiftly. Rule 3. Burn everything. Rule 4. Report back to firehouse immediately. Just stop her. My TV. Cat's clawing at the TV. Rule 5. Stand alert for other alarms. Everyone watched Montag. He did not move. The alarm sounded. The bell in the ceiling kicked itself 200 times. Suddenly there were 4 empty chairs. The cards fell in a flurry of snow. The brass pole shivered, and the men were gone. Montag sat in his chair. Below, the orange dragon coughed to life. Montag slid down the pole like a man in a dream. The mechanical hound leapt up in its kennel, its eyes all green flame. Montag, you forgot your helmet. He seized it off the wall behind him, ran, leapt, and they were off, the night wind hammering about their siren scream and their mighty metal thunder. It was a flaking 3-story house in the ancient part of the city. A century old if it was a day, but like all houses it had been given a thin, fireproof plastic sheath many years ago. And this preservative shell seemed to be the only thing holding it in the sky. Here we are. The engine slammed to a stop. Beatty, Stoneman, and Black ran up the sidewalk, suddenly odious and fat in their plump fireproof slickers. Montag followed. They crashed the front door and grabbed at a woman, though she was not running. She was not trying to escape. She was only standing, weaving from side to side, her eyes fixed upon a nothingness in the wall, as if they had struck her terrible blow as if they had struck her a terrible blow upon the head. Her tongue was moving in her mouth, and her eyes seemed to be trying to remember something, and then they remembered, and her tongue moved again. Play the man, Master Ridley. We shall this day light such a candle, by God's grace in England, as I trust shall never be put out. Enough of that, said Beatty. Where are they? He slapped her face with amazing objectivity and repeated the question. The old woman's eyes came to focus upon Beatty. You know where they are, or you wouldn't be here, she said. Stoneman held out the telephone alarm card with a complaint signed in telephone duplicate on the back. I've reason to suspect addict, 11 number Elm, City EB. That would be Mrs. Blake, my neighbor, said the woman reading the initials. All right, men, let's get him. Next thing, they were up in musty blackness, swinging silver hatchets at doors that were, after all, unlocked, tumbling through like boys all rollick and shout. Hey! A fountain of books sprang down upon Montag as he climbed, shuddering up the sheer stairwell. How inconvenient! Always before it had been like snuffing a candle. The police went first and adhesive taped the victim's mouth and bandaged him off into their glittering beetle cars. So when you arrived, you found an empty house. You weren't hurting anyone. You were hurting only things. You're so gross. You just burped so loud on this thing. I'm not deleting that out, too. I want them to use it. You weren't hurting anyone. You were hurting only things. And since things really couldn't be hurt, since things felt nothing and things don't scream or whimper, as this woman might begin to scream and cry out, there was nothing to tease your conscience later. You were simply cleaning up. Janitorial work, essentially. Everything in its proper place. Quick with the kerosene! Who's got a match? But now tonight someone had slipped. This woman was spoiling the ritual. The men were making too much noise, laughing and joking, to cover her terrible accusing silence below. She made the empty rooms roar with accusation and shake down a fine dust of guilt that was sucked in their nostrils as they plunged about. It was neither cricket nor correct. Montag felt an immense irritation. She shouldn't be here on top of everything. Books bombarded his shoulders, his arms, his upturned face. A book lit almost obediently like a white pigeon in his hands, wings fluttering. In the dim, wavering light, a page hung open, and it was like a snowy feather, the words delicately painted thereon. In all the rush and fervor, Montag had only an instant to read a line, but it blazed in his mind for the next minute as if stamped there with fiery steel. Time has fallen asleep in the afternoon sunshine. He dropped the book, and immediately another fell into his arms. Montag, up here! Montag's hand closed like a mouth, crushed the book with wild devotion. Just developed this horrible habit of just clawing at TV for no reason at all, but she won't stop doing it. Montag's hand closed like a mouth, crushed the book with wild devotion, with an instant of mindlessness to his chest. The men above were hurling shovelfuls of magazines into the dusty air. They fell like slaughtered birds, and the woman stood below like a small girl among the bodies. Montag had done nothing. His hand had done it all. His hand, with a brain of his own, with a conscience and a curiosity in each trembling finger, had turned thief. Now it plunged the book back under his arm, pressed it tight to sweating armpit, rushed out empty with a magician's flourish. Look here, innocent, look! He gazed shaken at that white hand. He held it way out as if he were far-sighted. He held it close, as if he were blind. Montag! He jerked about. Don't stand there, idiot! The books lay like great mounds of fishes left to dry. The men danced and slipped and fell over them. Titles glittered, their golden eyes falling, gone. Kerosene! They pumped the cold fluid with the numeral 451 tank strapped to their shoulders. They coated each book. They pumped rooms full of it. They hurried downstairs, Montag staggering after them in their kerosene fumes. Come on, woman! The woman knelt among the books, touching the drenched leather and cardboard, reading the gilt titles with her fingers while her eyes accused Montag. You can't ever have my books, she said. You know the law, said Beatty. Where's your common sense? None of those books agree with each other. You've been locked up here for years with a regular damned Tower of Babel. Snap out of it. The people in those books never lived. Come on now. She shook her head. The whole house is going up, said Beatty. The men walked clumsily to the door. They glanced back at Montag, who stood near the woman. You're not leaving her, he protested. She won't come. Force her, then. Beatty raised his hand in which she was concealed the igniter. We're due back at the house. Besides, these fanatics always try suicide. The pattern's familiar. Montag placed his hand on the woman's elbow. You can come with me. No, she said. Thank you anyway. I'm counting to 10, said Beatty. 1, 2. Please, said Montag. Go on. said the woman. 3, 4. Here. Montag pulled at the woman. The woman replied quietly, I want to stay here. 5, 6. You can stop counting, she said. She opened the fingers of one hand slightly, and in the palm of the hand was a single, slender object. An ordinary match. The sight of it rushed the men out and down from the house. Captain Beatty, keeping his dignity, backed slowly through the front door, pink face burnt and shiny from 1,000 fires and night excitements. God, thought Montag, how true. Always at night the alarm comes, never by day. Is it because fire is prettier by night? Spectacle, a better show? The pink face of Beatty now showed the faintest panic in the door. The woman's hand twitched the single matchstick. The fumes of kerosene bloomed up about her. Montag felt the hidden book pound like a heart against his chest. Go on, said the woman, and Montag felt himself back away and away out of the door, after Beatty down the steps, across the lawn, where the path of kerosene lay like the track of some evil snail. On the front porch where she had come to weigh them quietly with her eyes, her quietness a condemnation, the woman stood motionless. Beatty flicked his fingers to spark the kerosene. He was too late. Montag gasped. The woman on the porch reached out with contempt to them all and struck the kitchen match against the railing. People ran out of the houses all down the street. They said nothing on their way back to the firehouse. Nobody looked at anyone else. Montag sat in the front seat with Beatty and Black. They did not even smoke their pipes. They sat there looking out the front of the great salamander as they turned a corner and went silently on. Master Ridley, said Montag at last. What? Said Beatty. She said Master Ridley. She said some crazy thing when we came in the door. Play the man, she said. Master Ridley. Something, something, something. We shall this day light such a candle by God's grace in England, as I trust shall never be put out, said Beatty. Stoneman glanced over the captain, as did Montag, startled. Beatty rubbed his chin. A man named Latimer said that to a man named Nicholas Ridley as they were being burnt alive at Oxford for heresy on October 16th, 1555. Montag and Stoneman went back to the street as it moved under the engine wheels. I'm full of bits and pieces, said Beatty. Most fire captains have to be. I'm surprised myself. Watch it, Stoneman. Stoneman braked the truck. Damn, said Beatty. You got right by the corner where we turned for the firehouse. Who is it? Who would it be? Said Montag, leaning back against the closed door in the dark. His wife said at last, Well, put on the light. I don't want the light. Come to bed. He heard her roll impatiently, the bed springs squealed. Are you drunk? She said. So it was the hand that started it all. He felt one hand, then the other, work his coat free and let it slump to the floor. He held his pants out into an abyss and let them fall into darkness. His hands had been infected, and soon it would be his arms. He could feel the poison working up his wrists and into his elbows and his shoulders, and then the jump, over from shoulder blade to shoulder blade like a spark leaping a gap. His hands were ravenous, and his eyes were beginning to feel hunger as if they must look at something, anything, everything. His wife said, What are you doing? He balanced in space with the book in his sweating cold fingers. A minute later she said, Well, just don't stand there in the middle of the floor. He made a small sound. What? She asked. He made more soft sounds. He stumbled toward the bed and shoved the book clumsily under the cold pillow. He fell into bed and his wife cried out, startled. He lay far across the room from her on a winter island separated by an empty sea. She talked to him for what seemed a long while, and she talked about this and she talked about that, and it was only words, like the words he had heard once in a nursery at a friend's house. A 2-year-old child building word patterns, talking jargon, making pretty sounds in the air. But Montag said nothing, and after a long while, when he only made the small sounds, he felt her move in the room and come to his bed and stand over him and put her hand down to feel his cheek. He knew that when she pulled her hand away from his face, it was wet. 'Cause he'd been crying. Alright, guys. That is the reading for today and the reading for the week. Don't forget to submit your journals and take a quiz. Next week we'll get right back into it. But enjoy a couple days off, and I'll see you soon. Have a great weekend.